Fans of the Horus Heresy, thank you for joining me for a sad video, which is called My Ode to a Triaros. So, if you've been following the channel, you'll remember that a couple of months back, so it was actually the end of November, I bought myself a Triaros armoured conveyor and I did an unboxing, and fair to say it was an absolute car crash on the quality control front, and there's lots of mistakes with the kit. So yeah, I got all the parts swapped, and when I got given the second set of parts, there was some further faults, or further fault with the upper hull, which was out of size. Now, I'm not going to go into all the detail. I've put links in the description to the earlier video. So yeah, if you've not seen it already, go have a watch, and then you'll understand all the background to this. Right, so I've now got my kit refunded. I've not been able to work out the quality issues with Forge World to my satisfaction, which is unusual and the first time that their customer service people haven't sorted me out, in a way. And it's a slightly odd one, this, and to kind of help you understand how I feel, I'm going to tell you a bit of a story, and do bear with me because this is relevant. So about 9 years ago, I bought myself a brand new car, and I was doing a lot of business mileage at the time. So I was working away several hundred miles from home during the week, and so I was getting paid a lot of money by the company I was working with for my business travel, and yeah, I decided to use that money to get myself a car, and at the time there was a thriving market in car brokerage, so I could get a brand new top mark car about like a 10% discount. So it worked at the time, so I did it. Alright, so I bought myself this brand new Audi A3. It's a lovely car, looked great, pearlescent metallic black, looked great. So yeah, anyway, I'd had this car a couple of months, done a few thousand miles driving in it, and then one day, me and Mrs. Leakycheese and the first of the cheeselets, we just got back from shopping, and we parked up, and cheeselet number one was asleep, so we left her to sleep in the car a bit, and we took our shopping in, and a few moments later, someone knocked on our door and said, "Is that your car?" And I looked across the street at a car which had embedded itself into a lamppost, and it was a case of, yes, that is my car. So what had happened was the handbrake had failed on my Audi A3, which, and this was a brand new from the manufacturer car that was 3 months old. So of course I had it immediately recovered to the franchise dealer, and I went and saw them the next business day to explain what had happened. So the handbrake had failed, and the actual handbrake itself was broken, as in the grip assembly. So anyway, so I said, you've got to sort this out, you've got to understand, you've got to work out what it is, and there's damage to repair. So anyway, so I left it with them. They gave me a very nice courtesy car, so I was still mobile, and they had the car for a week. Anyway, at the end of that week, they repaired the front bumper, so a few £1,000s worth of bodywork they did at their own expense. They gave me a car, but they said, oh well, we couldn't figure out. They repaired the handbrake as well, so expensive repairs, and they met all those costs themselves. But they did say, well, we've tested the car many times and we can't figure out what the problem is with the handbrake. It seems normal to me. And at this point, I felt, well, they've done all these good things for me, and they've kind of, they've been really good about it. They forked out several £1,000s in repairs. However, I've got this niggling feeling is that they can't explain and resolve what the real problem was. Anyway, so I thought about it, and I took the car back, and I drove it, and off I went again. And I didn't think anything else of it for another few months until it happened again. Now this time, fortunately, it was on the flat, so there was no rollaway. But suffice to say, at that point, I lost confidence in the car, and within a couple of weeks, it was no longer in my possession. So yeah, so that little story, I just told you that little story because that very much encapsulates how I feel about Forge World with regards to my Triaros. So they treated me well, but they didn't solve the problem. And sort of I was left feeling, you know, a bit of a knock in confidence with them as a result. So the problem was, in the second video, that the two upper hull pieces, or the upper hull, the replacement they gave me for the original one, which had loads of mould slippage on it and damaged detail, it had shrunk. So it was a bit too small for it, and there's no way you could resolve this because the upper hull was one size, you know, upper hull was size A, lower hull sort of size B, and you know, they're supposed to do that, but they did that, so they didn't fit properly. And so I even went and saw them, explained what was up, and the guy who I saw said, oh well, you know, can probably heat it up and squeeze it together for you. And I said to him, I said, well, no, I don't want you to heat it up and squeeze it together for me. I could do that at home and make a bodge of it. What I want you to do is I want you to look at your production process and figure out what happened with the part you gave me, and then give me a part that's actually the correct size. So he said, oh, leave it with me anyway. So I left it with him, and then a couple of weeks later I got an email back saying, oh, well, we've built your Triaros for you, and you can see it does go together. And I looked at the photos, and I could see the sort of, you know, exactly the sort of hashed together assembly, which I knew would be the result of putting it together with the wrong size upper hull. So I was like, well, that's not really what I want, is it? And the guy actually said the distortion on the part size was within an acceptable tolerance for the kit, which I didn't accept, and I said, well, I'll have a refund, thank you. And they've refunded me. So, well, I say they've refunded me. I had to chase them up today because they messed up the refund process, so they were a week late. So anyway, I think that's sorted now. But yeah, so very unusual that. I've dealt with Forge World on a number of occasions with regards to faulty parts, but this is the first time they've not given me a satisfactory outcome. And they did give me a gesture of goodwill, so much like with, you know, my story about Audi. You know, they fixed the car. They gave me a gesture of goodwill from Forge World for the inconvenience caused. But despite that, they didn't address my main issue, and now everyone sort of ended up losing. So they've invested a load of time into it. They've given me some free stuff, and they've lost a sale. Whereas on my part, okay, I've got some free stuff, so that's good. But at the same time, I've not got what I really wanted, which was a model in a good condition to build. So, yeah, a bit disappointed there, and unusual. So, what would I say to you guys based on that? Well, if you ever get any faulty parts, just keep emailing them for replacements. Never go see them. That would be my advice based on that. Anyway, what I would like to talk to you about now, though, is an interesting thing that came out of a conversation with the guy I met. I had quite a long chat with him, and he explained to me about how Forge World make their moulds, and from this explanation, he's given me an idea as to why some of the, certainly in terms of size mismatches on parts, how that could be occurring. So let's go to an aerial view, and I'll do a little bit of sketching. Okay, so allow me to explain with the aid of some paper and a couple of our favourite markers, Sharpies. Right, so how the guy explained the production process works is as follows. So the starting point is the original model, and I'm going to just draw a blob. Yeah, so, and this is the original master sculpt that's been built by the sculptor. So, you know, if we stick with our little friend the Triaros, you know, you imagine Stuart Williamson takes his final model of a Triaros down to production and says, here you go, boys and girls, you can start production. Right. So what then happens is, from the original, they make a mould, and from that mould, they then make what they call the master. You have to excuse the writing. I'm writing at a slightly odd angle here. So the master, they make a mold. They take the mold and they make a master model. They then take the mold and they kind of, you know, the first mold, you know, they put it away under lock and key and save it. And they do the same with the original model. So those are never going to be used in the production process. The next thing that happens is from the master, they will cast a series of resin models. So let's imagine they do, just to keep it simple, and so I don't have to draw too much and have you put up with too much of my handwriting. They make some submasters. God, look at that bad writing. I'll just put sub master. There you go. So what's happened? So they've then taken from the original mold. They've cast 2 new models. Now, what is happening here is each time they're doing this, shrinkage is occurring. Each time you create a model, you create a mold from original model, you lose a small amount of size. Now, as long as this all stays in parallel, in theory, and as long as everything's kept constant, the proportions should be preserved. Right, I think it's the next stage that is problematic. From the submaster, they then cast a series. I don't know how many, but let's just do a load of production molds. And it's from these production molds that the models that you and I buy from Forge World are created. So what's happened is a series of shrinkage events has occurred in this production process. Firstly, there's been an element of shrinkage occur in the creation of the master mold, and then it's happened again with the submaster, and then it's happened again to get to the production mold. And you know, I don't know how many submasters they will make off a master. I don't know how many production molds are made off of submasters, but you know, clearly what I see here is at every step there's an opportunity for an inconsistency to arise. And what happens if a production mold, molds from a production mold here down that route, what happens if they get mixed up with some of the molds from a part that's come from this submaster? Is the tolerance of the process good enough to ensure the proportions of the parts here are good enough to match there? I suggest not. And what also, do they have a good enough process to ensure that for each set of production molds, there's no crossover between production A, B, C, D, all that have come from the same submaster? Because again, at each incidence, you've got an opportunity for variation to occur because of the nature of the process. So that's one thing that I see as being a factor in them not being able to give me the correct size part here. There is another thing that I know has happened, and a friend of mine who, you know, has seen inside the Forge World production process and used to work at GW, told me about cases where parts get distorted when instead of so let's say part of a kit's mold, part of a kit's molds, one of the molds fails. For whatever reason, the submaster can't be located. What has happened sometimes is a new mold has been made from a production mold to create in effect a sub-production mold. Sorry about the handwriting, yeah? So you've got yet another instance of shrinkage potentially occurring there. So yeah, that was quite interesting to understand that and you know, visualize this sort of hierarchy of mold production. Now, I don't know enough about resin molding and mass produced resin molding to understand if this is a industry practice approach, or if this is a particular methodology that Forge World uses for production. But having this explained to me, and then just thinking about it a bit, and also sort of putting it together with what, you know, my inside person told me about this, kind of, well, it's hardly surprising that not all parts are made to the same size all the time, and sometimes inconsistencies occur, and particularly, you know, making a sub-production mold off a production mold is going to be problematic, because, you know, you've done everything out of sequence. And I wonder if this is what happened with the recast part of my Triaros, if it was actually a new mold that had been cast off a production part, a production kit, as opposed to going back to the submaster to create a new mold. Anyway, so, well, I guess that is that, and you know, I hope you find that interesting. You know, yeah, I don't like moaning about. I don't want to moan about Forge World, and you know, for balance, you know, this is only one instance out of many where I've not been able to get a satisfactory resolution to the problem. However, you know, I think it's worth calling out to you guys, and it's you know, I hope maybe if you're encountering issues with part sizing, this might, you know, help you understand what's going on and give you something to feed back to them. And the other thing, of course, is as well, you know, Forge World models are not cheap. All resin miniatures are expensive miniatures, and Forge World models are probably more expensive than the average, because, you know, let's be honest, you're paying for Games Workshop and Forge World's enormous business overheads. They've got a huge main office building, they've got loads of staff, they've got all the artists, etc, etc, etc. So you are paying more in every model for those business overheads. So I think, you know, it's right for us to expect top quality. Anyway, let me know what you think. Thank you very much for watching. I will speak to you next time, and goodbye.